All right, let's bring in Adam Jahns from The Athletic, the Hoge and Jahns podcast. What are you smiling about?
You guys got those ads down. Very good.
Well,
Very
you know,
good.
it's almost
Well
like we're
done.
professionals.
Especially Nick, you know.
Yeah.
You got a little distracted there with a tennis ball being brought in.
Well, that's every single ad read we do. Carmen's always giggling at some comment or putting something up on the screen.
Oh,
always.
Oh,
10 out of 10 times.
Never heard this beef until now. This is
text me on the side, Carmen. I got you.
New beef of the day. All right. Too much action during the reads, Carm. I'm planting that flag. I'm not giving that one up. By the way, do you two know each other? This is adorable. I think this is the first time, at least, that I've been here that Jahns has been on the show. This is very exciting for me.
It's good to be here, boys.
Yeah, it is. I think it's the second or third appearance, one of the two. But you know, when he writes 10,000 words in a story, we got to bring him on. That's the rule. There's
only 3,000 there, Adam Hoge.
Okay.
Only 3,000.
Hey, I went through the whole article and did line by line things that I want to bring up, buddy. This was a hell of a job by you guys. Congratulations.
Thanks, Carm. But I think I only got 10 minutes for that.
We're all right, John. Well, Carm, since you have all these things, I'll let you start. But I want to make sure people know what was written here was the Athletics perspective piece, insider view of the big trade that went down. And the cool thing is it's got the Panthers side with Joe Person, who covers the Panthers for the Athletic, and then Jahns and Kevin Fishbane getting all the dirt on the Bears side, which you should read. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you are at theathletic.com/HoganJahns. Carm, go ahead.
I do want to shout out Braggs' comment. Finally, the better Adam. That is just straight rude from it. Wow. I mean, really over the top. I thought the beefs were over with this whole Fairleigh Dickinson thing, but apparently not.
Well, I was over it, but
it's a brick thrown, right? That's what that counts as.
That is a brick thrown, and I will now be continuing on the bit and wearing my Fairleigh Dickinson shirt on Wednesday's show, which I was actually not going to do, but now I will.
What a complete jerk. That was unbelievable, this guy. All right, so here, what jumped out at me, Adam Jahns, right at the start, quote from Ryan Poles. I was, quote, pacing back and forth just all over the place. I just wanted to get it done. I don't know exactly if he told that to you or whoever, but it just jumped off at me like, you know, part of the deal is you got to sit with the anxiety of what are you going to do? And so he's outing himself, saying like, I'm not saying that it was he's very comfortable in his move, but I thought that stood out in a big way.
Yeah, 12 days of negotiations with the Panthers, and there was other teams involved. I know you ask about that, but I think for Ryan Poles, when he told us that, it was like, it's right here. The deal that I like, a player that I like, it's all right here. Let's get this done. It was a long process, a lot of talks on the phone, in person, in Indianapolis. Let's get that done. So it was good to see some of the emotions come out, because you could imagine these guys are so even-keeled by the time they talk to us. But you know these conversations can get contentious. There's emotions that come in before and after the fact. So it was good to see that side from Ryan Poles.
Jahns, what was obviously extensive work here that you did with Fishbane, but what is the big takeaway from just what you kind of gathered there from, again, listening to polls, listening to all the GMs kind of speaking about how this trade went down?
I think it's the process of Ryan Poles. It's talking to Kyle Davidson from the Blackhawks, getting as much information that he can, not thinking he has everything figured out, right? Like seeking help outside of football to get some advice from hockey, since players are traded all the time for draft compensation. That's different in the NFL. You don't see it as much as you do in hockey. So I like that. And Ryan Poles has mentioned that before. He's got contacts in baseball that he reaches out to, that he feels out for certain questions or concerns that he has with the Bears and whatnot. So I like the process. Like it's going to Indianapolis prepared. It's doing his due diligence with all the teams that could have interest in quarterbacks, not only in like the top 10 where you had the Texans, you had the Panthers, you had the Raiders, like the obvious teams, the Colts. But beyond that, like who's interested beyond 10? Who can move up for a huge swing? So I like the process of Ryan Poles.
Another thing that stood out to me, Jahns, that I thought was new information that no one else had at this point was, I think from the Panthers side of things, was Scott Fitterer saying that he really felt like the sweet spot in this draft class is somewhere between 20 and 45. Really good value in there. And that was a big reason why he didn't want to give up the 39th overall pick, which Poles was asking for. And so instead, they essentially gave up 2 second-round picks instead of that pick because it's 61. It's a lot later. And that's where the 2025 second-rounder came in, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So what you have is, well, it's a negotiation, right? It was honestly like a, I don't know if it was amicable, but it was a friendly back and forth for the most part. There was a trade offer that was pulled by the Panthers when they left Indianapolis, when they left the combine. A couple days later, talks heated up again between the two teams when Scott Fitterer was at his daughter's soccer game. It was just time. There was too much competition. There was too much rumblings out there of other teams potentially wanting to move up. But you're right. But I think the point for Poles, like, he didn't get the 39th pick, but he's got 3 picks within a 12-pick range, like later in that round, on day 2 of the draft. So if he wanted to move up, maneuver the draft again, he's got more capital to do so now.
So that's just an interesting point that I shouldn't dive down, but I think it's interesting that Fitterer, while at his daughter's soccer game, prioritized his job over his own daughter to make the trade. Shouldn't he have waited an hour to call up Poles? I mean, and then Poles, now we know he goes to the Deer Path Inn for dinner. I don't know if you have any reporting on what he actually gets, but the level of detail in this piece, like you knew that he was at the soccer game and like wasn't paying attention and didn't even know who scored while he made the deal. This is an elite level reporting, Adam Jahns.
My favorite fun fact is that Ryan Poles switched hotels. The JW Marriott at the Combine is an insane place. It's always busy. Every hour of the day, it's nonstop. It's actually even busier post 10 p.m. when everybody's coming back from the meetings. All the scouts and executives are coming back from the meetings. Ryan Poles didn't want to stay there. He was down the street at the Hyatt, which is, every year I meet a good agent buddy there, and it's a lot calmer, I should say, than the scene at the JW.
Unless Jalen Carter is getting charged for something, then it's not so calm from what I heard at the Hyatt. But that's super inside Jahns, but that stood out to me too. It was like, oh wow, he actually left the JW to be in a separate place, whether that's just paranoia of who he's meeting with or just staying, because where the Bears stay, you can't really get from your hotel room to anywhere else you got to go without walking through a busy area. Or Brad Biggs sitting at the Starbucks, So
there are a lot of Bears reporters that set up in the JW Starbucks on the second floor there.
Yeah, it sounds super interesting. Nick, you got anything else?
Yeah, real quick, Jahns. When we were talking about Ryan Poles and maybe this organization with the sense of calmness that it kind of feels within the Bears right now, then kind of reading through your piece, there's some tidbits about how Poles was up all night or thinking about things. And then he wouldn't the 3 players they wanted to trade from the Panthers, Burns and guys, DJ Moore was the most you can get rid of him because he's a wide receiver in a way. Do you feel a sense that Ryan Poles kind of settled in any way for what ended up happening from the trade to 1 to 9, almost exploring that the trade at number 2 with Houston? Is there any sense of almost settling?
I know what you're saying, Nick, but go
good
back
question.
Go back in time a little bit where the Panthers were hitting full rebuild mode. Christian McCaffrey's being traded, and everybody's asking about DJ Moore, and they put their foot down. We're not trading DJ Moore. He's going to be the part of the core of the future here. He had 3,000-yard receiving seasons without a good quarterback here. We like the guy. And they didn't want to trade him. I felt like we made that pretty clear. Now, how they rank amongst Derek Brown and Brian Burns, I get at the pass rusher and the 3 technique. You can make the argument. I know Fitterer did that those are harder positions to evaluate and get right. But I could tell you from covering the Bears for a decade, it's not easy to get the wide receiver position right either. Sometimes you have to bring him in from the outside. That's where the Bears' best ones at least have come from, other than Alshon Jeffrey.
So that was interesting too. That the Bears wanted 1 of 3. I mean, did you get any sense, Adam Jahns, that Moore was their 3rd pick and they were willing to take DJ Moore, or any idea how they had him ordered?
I think they wanted to help Justin Fields, and I get the idea of adding a pass rusher, adding a 3 technique, both huge holes, right, for the Bears defense. But I think if you look at the draft classes, Like, you could probably find your 3 technique in the second round. You could probably find one in the first round if you want to reach a little bit at 9. You could probably find a good pass rusher there at 9 if you want. And they get offensive tackles there, and I think that's where the Bears are going. But the Bears wanted to help Justin Fields. And I think finding that experienced receiver, Hoge and I have talked about this a bit, like getting in that trend of adding that experienced receiver for that young quarterback, where they help each other take that next step in their careers. Like we've seen it play out in Philadelphia. We've seen it play out in Buffalo with great results. I'm glad the Bears have taken that path towards that trend in the NFL.
And one other thing that I just throw in there is a lot of times there's a veteran receiver and then a first-round draft pick, too. So that's one of the many reasons why I haven't completely taken wide receiver off the board for the Bears early, which I'm sure we'll talk about a lot more this month. I want to highlight a couple comments. One, a super chat from our guy, the Duke, who's in here all the time, Johnsy. The better half, sup, Johnsy, you and Fishman crushed it. So I think that earns you an invite to Duke Island, which is the island that the Duke owns that we may have made up, but I've now convinced myself.
I was going to ask if you've been there yet, but I'll take it.
No, it's
Fishman's been Duke's the man, and Fishman's been having a very rough time with Julian Roper transferring out of Northwestern and Boo Booey declaring for the NBA draft. Fishman's not had an easy week. Neither have I.
But he's in the comments here too, pointing out that he thought that he said Kevin Fishman in the comments. Fishman, by the way, has a like a cult following on this show for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's the most popular, friend of the show. He says, "Great show, guys. Thought this was the story of the day."
He's a witty one, So Kevin Fishman's got a lot of family and friends in the area that seem to fill up the comment section a lot. That's, I would say, Fishman.
Fishman is very popular as the Fishman and the Fishbane and all things Bears on CHGO. There's no doubt about it. In fact, I'm officially jealous by the level of popularity that Kevin Fishbane has the show, because I think most people, if we voted right now, would kick me off and put him on, which is unfortunate for me.
He's got another comment here. There we go. I think I might be more popular on CHGO than on Hogan Jahns.
Yeah, that's
wow.
Well, Kevin filled in for me last week while I was still in Arizona. He did a great job. I do not understand how Jahns has never seen an episode of Hard Knocks in his life, which is apparently something that was discussed. But
it's a fun fact right there.
I don't know how fun it is.
That's interesting.
It's a fact.
Wait, I before I lose my train of thought here, I just want to get it out there. Another interesting thing in the piece, that Carolina was willing to go to 2. They're happy with 2 quarterbacks, but Houston wasn't, and they have one. If Houston wants their guy, then why wouldn't they want? Or I guess they don't, so they weren't willing to pay to go up. So they're both happy with 2 guys. Is that how we're reading this?
Good question. Well, here's the thing: they're happy with 2 guys, but say through these pro days, these private workouts, the dinners that they have over the next month, if they fall in love with one, or say one gets hurt, or something else pops up, now the Panthers have certainty. Some teams like having that. They don't like, letting things just fall to them or hope things fall in their favor. Now the Panthers have certainty. So if CJ Stroud happens to really win them over, he becomes their guy over the next few weeks, then you have certainty that you go and get him, which I think maybe surprised Ryan Poles to a certain extent that other teams didn't want that. But, like Ryan Pace used to operate in that fashion, like go get your guy. And I think with quarterbacks, it does make a lot of sense, especially when you start to separate them through your evaluations.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me that the Texans seem to be in the mix of all this, but is your conclusion, Jahns, that they just weren't ready to make a move now, whereas you had the Bears and Panthers who are like, the anxiety that Poles was obviously feeling with this number 1 pick in this trade is evident from a number of these pieces, including yours, that have come out. That it's just like they wanted to get this thing done for many different reasons, including knowing that they had their number 1 wide receiver going into free agency. But you had 2 teams motivated to just get it done on that Friday, and they weren't going to wait for another team to get involved.
Yeah, I think that's important for the Bears. They wanted to have their books in order going into free agency. whether or not they had to break the bank a little bit in other positions or where, receiver slots in their needs come free agency and then later the draft. So they like that level of certainty going into the new league year, or at least the negotiation window, to have that receiver position taken care of. But you're right. I think some teams, like I have this takeaway. I don't think some teams were just ready yet. Maybe they just wanted more time with these quarterbacks. Maybe they couldn't distinguish them from each other yet in terms of their own grades and their own evaluations. But the Bears and Panthers felt ready. Like they felt good. Like Ryan Poles left the combine thinking, that's 3 very good quarterbacks there. And if somebody wants him, come and get him. I'm not waiting. I want to move.
That was a super interesting piece. They interviewed him. They knew they weren't taking any of them, but they also gained confidence that these guys are going to be well liked. I like that part of their analysis. I thought that made a whole lot of sense.
Yeah,
Adam, were the Colts ever? I mean, I know you put like the timing and you just mentioned that. Were the Colts ever really, from your perspective, like in consideration for getting that number 1 overall?
Yeah, but the timing and the price at that moment wasn't right for them. And then that could go back to the Colts' own evaluations and grades at that time. There wasn't a quarterback that distinguished himself, at least in their own evaluations at that point. Now that could change, at least maybe in Jim Irsay's opinion, in a day or two. Maybe it's, Bryce Young that they really want to go get, but now it's kind of an unfavorable position to be in where you watch 2 quarterbacks go and you just got to hope someone falls to you. You got to hope someone doesn't jump you now to 3 because there's interest for that.
Well, Jahns, appreciate you jumping on. Awesome piece. I hope everybody takes a moment or two to check it out today on The Athletic, theathletic.com/Hoge and Jahns. We'll discuss this more on tomorrow's show as well on Hoge and Jahns. And we have some plenty of draft content coming your way on that show tomorrow as well. I'll just say that. So looking forward to it. Thanks, Johnsy.
Thanks, man. Carm, what do you got? You got one more?
I got last question.
All right.
I just want
saw
you
it in your face. I got you.
I want you on the record here. What are the Bears doing at 9, and who's the first quarterback that's taken?
They're taking Paris Johnson Jr. at number 9, the Ohio State tackle, and the first quarterback taken, C.J. Stroud. Look at that, Ohio State. Go Buckeyes.
Boom.
Take that, Hoge.
There it is.
All right.
Boom.
Playing the chalk, I appreciate it. It's probably I believe you on 1. I'm wondering about 9.
Well,
right.
Now that John's answered that question, I guess we'll just scrap the rest of the month and we'll talk to everybody on April 27th.
Yep, we're done.
All
See you
right.
guys. See you, boys.
There he is, Adam Jahns.